and expertise that you, our participants in this webinar, bring to advocacy, to praxis, to change agency, and then we're going to have an opportunity for you at the end to form breakout rooms to engage with each other in conversations, deeper conversations about what you heard, what you experienced in today's session, to be able to engage with our amazing panelists here, to have deeper conversations with them. You're going to have that opportunity at the end of our webinar today. So here are amazing, brilliant teachers. They are expert practitioners, accomplished educators in their own right, and they represent a variety of public school districts across the region, and they have been carefully selected for you. And we are so grateful for the time. They spent their entire day teaching, and here they are engaging with all of us today. From left to right, Mayra Lavadens, you may hear a similarity in name. She's a 4th and 5th grade dual language teacher in the dual immersion program in Montebello Unified School District. She's also a constant fellow. Karina Makela, who's a 6th grade mathematics teacher in Chula Vista Learning Communities Charter School. Elizabeth Rondero, a longtime friend of our Center of SEAL, 3rd grade dual language teacher in Azusa Unified. And Violeta Hernandez, a program specialist in San Bernardino City Schools, where she is in the multilingual programs department. And next, I would love to introduce you our longstanding partner and co-sponsor for this event, Manuel Buenrostro, who is the policy director for Californians Together, a leading and the prime advocacy organization in the state who is advocating and champion for an asset-based approach to English learner education and practice. Manuel, thank you so much for being here. I'm turning it to you.
Thank you, Professora Lavadens. Appreciate that. Californians Together is proud to collaborate with the Loyola Marymount University Center for Equity for English Learners on many issues ranging from accountability to expanding bilingual teacher preparation and bilingual education, all the way to supporting math achievement for multilingual learners. Next slide, please. A few notes about today's logistics that I just want to make sure that that we highlight. Today's meeting is being recorded so that we can share the knowledge with you after the webinar. If you have any questions, the Q&A will be monitored in the chat, and there will be an opportunity for questions in the breakout rooms as well. Lastly, the resources and opportunities to continue the conversation will be shared after the webinar. Next. I'm also proud to acknowledge that we are here as part of as proud members of the High Quality Instructional Materials Learning Partners Coalition. For over 3 years, this coalition has focused on ensuring that the 2023 math framework, as it was being approved, provided strong guidance to support English learners, and for the adoption process to also ensure that it centered the needs of our English learners. Along with LMU SEAL, I want to thank the other organizations who are part of this coalition, including the English Learner Success Forum, and we have a representative from that organization here, and Dr. Melissa Gilbert, who you will be hearing from later today, and also Benito Aranda Comer from Education Trust West. Next. I also want to make sure that I acknowledge the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for their support and ongoing efforts of the HQAM Learning Partners Coalition. Now, as we talk about math achievement for English learners, I want to talk a little bit about why this is the right moment and why math matters so much for our English learners. Next. First, we know that as we look at the demographics of students in California, it's important to center any educational initiative on English learners if we want it to be successful, and that includes mathematics. We have over 1 million students in California who are English learners, and as we look at the language assets of our students, 40% of our students in grades TK through 12 speak another language other than English at home. Next. As we look at math achievement, we also see that math is critical to our students' career and life success, yet the outcomes are not acceptable as we look at the trends in California. If we just hone in on 11th grade, we see that just 2% of our English learners were prepared to be proficient in the math achievement assessment. And as we look at our English proficient students, it was just 1 in 4 of English proficient students in 11th grade math. We know that we need to do better, and we know that if we focus on multilingual learners and English learners in these initiatives, that all students, including our English learners, will perform better. Next. The moment is also ripe as we think about the policy landscape in California. As you can see, there's been a lot of progress across many areas throughout the years in multilingual education in California. Math access for English learners is part of supporting the 2017 English Learner Roadmap policy, and it's part of Principle 2 around access to rigorous coursework and access to the content. It's also part of supporting the California Global 2030 goals. As we expand dual language programs and bilingual programs in California, math provides key content and key language that our multilingual students need. Next. Now we are at the point, as we look at the timeline in California, where the State Board of Education is about to approve the list of recommended math instructional materials for districts to consider this upcoming November 6th. So as the state takes this important action, it will be important that we center multilingual learners in your local district selection process for math instructional materials to ensure that they meet the needs of our English learners. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the framework, but as I talk about the framework, there's going to be a poll in the chat that I want to make sure that you take a look at. On a scale of 1 to 10, we want to know how familiar you are with the math framework, with 1 being you have not heard of it. So it's the first time, this might be the first time you hear of it. And a 5 might be that you have read through the whole framework and you're an expert on the framework. So we're going to give you a few minutes to answer that question. As you're answering that question, I just want to say a few words about the math framework and what the purpose that it meets in California education. So the math framework, just like any framework in California, is essentially state guidance on how districts and how educators can teach to this grade level standards across the different grade levels in California. It provides critical guidance for school district leaders, for educators, for instructional coaches, and also provides guidance on the instructional materials and how they can be selected either by the state level or also guidance at the local level. The framework is also important in that it states, specifically this updated math framework, it states that all students are math learners and that all students can do math. So it changes that mindset and makes sure that we are reinforcing things that are important, concepts that are important for English learners, including reinforcing deeper learning and engagement for our students. And we know that deep learning and engagement involves engagement through content and language. It emphasizes the linguistic diversity of our students, amongst many other things. We hope that as we look at the framework, you see some 3 opportunities that we see for English learners. These include making sure that you provide for increased access to equitable coursework for our English learners. We hope that it also creates opportunities to provide integrated English language development across the math content. And we also hope that as you select your instructional materials, that you see that as an additional opportunity to provide content and materials that meet the needs of our English learners. So as you're answering the question, I just want to make sure that we go back to the poll. I see that folks, that we have 32 people that have answered it so far. Folks can still answer it, but I see a wide range in knowledge about the math framework. I don't see an expert, or at least somebody has not identified themselves as an expert in the framework yet, but I'm glad to see that some people have heard of it for the first time here that's important that we start to engage in what the math framework might mean for math instruction in your districts. And then I see that many of us have heard of it and have engaged with it at some level. The other thing that I'll note is that as your districts think about selecting math instructional materials, it's important for your district to have an instructional vision, and around that instructional vision, define what high quality instructional materials might mean for your districts. As a resource, the HQIM Coalition has developed a definition of high quality instructional materials that you might consider. In that vision, we hope that you look at the needs for multilingual learners, specifically around access to coursework. So as we close out the first poll, I just want to make sure that you think about this next question. Do you and your district have a definition of high quality instructional materials that incorporates multilingual learners? So in this next question, let us know. 1 is a yes, you have a definition. 2 is no, and 3 is, well, 2 is you're not sure, and 3 is you definitely know that you don't have a definition. So it's important for you to think about that and reflect about where you might be in your district. And if you're not sure what the answer is to that question, it might be a good time to ask your district leaders if they have this definition as they think about adoptions. So thank you again for engaging in this important conversation. And now I'm going to hand it over to Veronica Torres McLean from Loyola Marymount University.
Thank you, Manuel. Hello, everybody. I'm Veronica Torres McLean, and I serve as Assistant Director for Professional Learning at our center, SEAL. And I am very excited about today because formative assessment and dual language immersion programs are very close to my heart. These are two areas that I'm very passionate about. And as we think about formative assessment, I want to engage you. So I want to invite you as we go through our time together. If you think of something, if you agree with something, put it in the chat. Say, yes, I agree, or like question mark. I want you to engage with us. We're in for a treat that we have our panelists coming soon. And so I want to get to them as soon as possible, but I want to set up a foundation. I want us to be in the same page as we engage in thinking about formative assessment. And so you will have a lot of opportunities to engage with us. We're going to be asking you to put in the chat, to answer some polls, because we really want this time to spark thoughts for you, to spark ideas. And so we're going to engage you in thinking about these. So to get an idea, we're going to put a poll in the Zoom now that is asking you about dual language programs. I would like to know, there's many of us here, and how close are you to dual programs? Are you teaching them? Are you leading? Or maybe you were just curious about dual language programs. So go ahead and answer that poll to give us an idea on that. And so we're thinking about dual language programs. And so what do our dual language immersion students deserve? They deserve access to an education that allows them to gain high levels of proficiency in both languages. And I'll bring them all as they come out. We want our students to achieve academically in all content areas and to deepen their understanding of culture, of language, identity, and community. And so the dual language program might be like a puzzle. That has been an exciting and also a puzzle for me. Maybe today you're thinking about the math framework and you're trying to see how does it fit with mathematics? What does that have to do with the language immersion instruction? How do I put these pieces together? And how do I bring in that piece of formative assessment? So as we're thinking about formative assessment, content, and language, maybe you're having some flashbacks to lesson planning and thinking about that. And take a deep breath. Let's bring the affective filter down. And I want to invite you to just engage in thinking about this frame of reference. And so as we are entering into our content, I want to present some opportunities to build capacity, to refine your practice, and also to engage. We heard from Dr. Lavadens and from Manuel that there's a need to really focus on multilingual learners, especially in mathematics, because mathematics has been a gatekeeper for many of our multilingual students. And so I want to assure you that we will be sharing all these opportunities with you, but we have institutes, we have free resources that are available free of charge to you through SEAL and also through our coalition. Our coalition is gathering all the best resources, webinars, and free resources to allow you and your team to grow. So I also want to share this great news. We have already the English Learner Master Playbook that is available in our website. It's free. And we have the By Leaders in By Design Playbook. It will be coming in 2026. So we're very excited to help you, to help your teams, your school, your district to build dual language programs by design, by literacy by design. And also we have a formative assessment look for tool that it's a guide for teaching and learning with multilingual learners in mind. And so just so that we're all in the same page, who are our multilingual students? What is our evolving understanding? And I know that when we think of multilingual students, there are a lot of terms that we think of. Newcomers, dual language learners, heritage language learners, there's all these terms. And this is a definition from the Improving Education for Multilingual Learners from the California Department of Education. And I just want to give you a moment to kind of see what this definition is. It places multilingual learners as an umbrella term, and there are many different typologies under that umbrella of multilingual learners. And so it's important to see what are some of those typologies that are not represented yet in those definitions. And so as we move forward in exploring the math framework that Manuel mentioned, it was an accomplishment. It is policy. It is a document that really calls us to think about mathematics teaching and instruction in a different way. And so the math framework aligns with the roadmap policy that this is what makes California be at the vanguard of caring and serving and instruction for multilingual learners. And so thinking about the assets-oriented, the systems of support, the alignment, and how do we bring in assets and culturally and linguistic valid assessments to our students. So we're going to be looking more into how does that come to life through our panelist. But as the title of our webinar says, formative assessment from equity to evidence. We need to realize that when we begin with equity, we uncover the authentic evidence of multilingual learners, their mathematical thinking, their language, and sometimes there's many languages. And then we can see and uncover the growth, not just the language growth, but the content growth that sometimes it stays in the background. And so the math framework has three categories, three dimensions they call, that call for systemic change to support shifts in mathematics education, mathematics instruction. And so each of these categories presents different shifts that they present. And at SEAL, we talk about three non-negotiable anchors: language, culture, and equity. And so these anchors guide every aspect of program design, instruction, and assessment and formative assessment. And so when we ground our instruction, our planning, our interactions with our students, that allows us to see what they know, what they think, and what they understand. And sometimes that might be expressed through gestures, drawings, or words in either of their languages. But that has to be what is anchoring us. And so, what is formative assessment for multilingual English learners? And again, we're setting the stage. We are coming from the same place to understand and be able to see what our panelists are going to bring to us. And so as we move forward, we're going to have another poll and just share with us. And again, we invite you to continually enter in the chat any feelings, any thoughts, any questions that are being sparked for you. And so how familiar are you with formative assessment practices that are centered on multilingual English learners? And as we bring the math framework to life, where is the math framework talking about formative assessment? And so we have these slides, and again, you will have access to all these slides, but there are several chapters where formative assessment is mentioned, is as part of the instructional design, as embedded practices, as part of the professional learning. But chapter 12, that is the chapter where formative assessment is really described. And I encourage you, if you are interested in formative assessment, in learning more, in figuring out how do I bring that to life in my classroom, this chapter 12 has great recommendations, word suggestions for that. So when we're thinking about formative assessment, if you would, please add in the chat, what is formative assessment? And I am going to see if I can see the chat here. So what is formative assessment? What do you think? If you're not sure, what do you think that is? What is formative assessment? And then what is not formative assessment? I'm going to give you a moment to think, what is and what is not? And so when we think of about formative assessment, we want to make sure, and thank you, Jacqueline, for putting that, a way to monitor students, yes, from where they're at, a method of evaluating student learning. Thank you, Benito. It is a process. It is monitoring. It's part of teaching. It's a process. It's timely. It has to do with feedback also. It's action oriented. And so when we talk about formative assessment, we're not talking about just checks for comprehension, like yes or no. That can be part of that, but that's not the only thing. And it's not an end of the unit test. It's not a product. It's not a thing. It is a process. It is what I like to call like a dance. Formative assessment is part of a relationship with our students. And so this is the definition from the math framework, and describes this as a process where teachers and students use it during instruction, during learning. And so this formative assessment dance, teachers give the input, and then we want that output from students. And so based on what we get, then we adjust and we give again. And so we move back and forth, back and forth. And so chapter 12 really goes into this describing what are the elements of formative assessment. And these practices are not a product again. These are practices. It is a process of engaging our students and their learning. And so the math framework also pulls and uplifts parts of the ELA ELD framework that present formative assessment as a dynamic part of a comprehensive assessment system. And so when we're thinking about our multilingual learners, formative assessment is powerful, but when we are needing to engage with our students and what they have to offer, we need to really know them. And so we call this a continuous formative assessment cycle because it is like a dance and it keeps coming. And so we need to know our content and language standards. We need to really know our students. We need to know their proficiency levels in English and the other language. We need to make sure that we understand what are the scaffolds, the supports that they need. And it is a dance. It's actively engaging both teachers and students. And we want that evidence. So we take a step and then we want to step back. We want that evidence. And then we want to be able to provide descriptive and actionable feedback. We want them to be able to understand what are the next steps that they need to take. And then we close this circle with how the formative assessment, how our observations are going to inform our next steps and what the students are going to do. So as we move into our time to see in the flesh, having some testimonials from practitioners and leaders, educators who are advocating, who are engaged in informative assessment in their work, we will see and share, think about how prepared do you feel to implement formative assessment practices with specific considerations for multilingual English learners. And so we are going to move now into our panel presentations. And I want to reiterate how excited we are to hear from these phenomenal group of educators and leaders who are going to share with us a little bit more about what they're doing in their classrooms with formative assessment. And so I'm going to give them a moment. I'm going to start sharing, and I will just give them a moment to introduce themselves. So Mayra, Karina, Elizabeth, and Violeta will introduce themselves and just very briefly give you a context for where they are.
Hola, everybody. I am Mayra Lavadens. I am a 4th and 5th grade dual language teacher in the Montebello Unified School District. And I have the pleasure of focusing purely on the math and the science, and my partner teacher does the language arts.
Hello, everyone. My name is Karina Makala, and I teach 6th grade English and mathematics in a dual language school in Chula Vista, CVLCC. And so my partner teacher teaches history and lectoescritura, and I focus on the math and then English language arts.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here. My name is Elizabeth Rondero, and I am a 3rd grade dual immersion teacher with Azusa Unified. We are a 90-10 model, and the language of instruction per se in 3rd grade is predominantly in Spanish for math. However, we'll hear a little bit about what it looks like in the classroom.
Hello, my name is Violeta Hernandez. I am a program specialist for the Multilingual Programs Department in San Bernardino City Unified. I'm also a former bilingual teacher and a mainstream teacher. I previously taught 4th, 5th, and 6th grade.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, welcome. And we're going to start with Mayra. And we have some questions, and we want to see what happens in your classroom. And so let me share my screen again. And so we're going to look at el momento formativo. Mayra, we would love to see how you prompt for evidence of thinking through your math time, your routines. And so as we are sharing, we want to see and we want to be thinking about how basing in our equity we want to see that brilliance that each of these callings brings, uncovers for their students.
So I've been privileged to be able to really focus on the math for quite a few years now. And so I've been also training with CGI for about 10 to 12 years now, and our district is a CGI district. And so my routines are all centered around dialogue, discussion, and a lot of joy. I find math extremely joyful and fun and energetic, and we're moving and we're not sitting, and it's the exact opposite, I think, of how I was taught. So there's already expectations, which we've had the privilege, again, of teaching my students 2 years in a row. So we've had these expectations that we're always listening, we're sharing, we're giving feedback, and we're making meaning as a class together. So we do problem solving as a group. These are like our daily routines, or maybe twice or 3 times a week. We problem solve as a group. I will select math work to discuss after I'm seeing them work as a group. Or we will also do kind of like a carousel, which I showed a video of, and observe and discuss. And then we go to independent problem solving. Again, all of my math is based upon problem solving. It's all word problems every single day. And so during that time, I am observing, note-taking, going around. Sometimes it's a little more formal where I jot notes down. Other times I'm just really living in the moment and seeing what's happening. Something that kind of shifted my classroom this year, a teacher who one is my mentor teacher, she read this book. She says, you have to read this book. So this kind of really changed everything this year. It's so exciting. So how I set up my problem solving is that there's 3 students in each group. That's the magic number. You should read this book. They'll explain everything. They're called daily visible random group selection. So prior to this, of course, you think we need to partner our groups in somebody who is a little bit more proficient and in kids who can have the support. But what the research has shown is that those children then depend on others to do the thinking for them. And they get used to that. And so also that kids won't believe you if you don't do it visibly. If you don't randomly select the group, they won't believe you that it's actual random. So then another thing is that they are called vertical non-permanent surfaces, where they're standing around the classroom. Standing is much better for generating brain energy and getting the blood circulating, and they have 1 marker. And so my rule is that the person who has the idea cannot write with the marker, because then I'm just solving everything. You need to then explain it to your friend. Okay, well, I'm visualizing this, and what do you think? So they start to have these discussions. And so what I have seen in just a few months is really a big change, especially those kids who were kind of sitting back and letting everybody else take over the thinking for them. And when you get randomly selected, maybe I have 3 students who really struggle. I have 6 RSP students. I have 3 students, they're going to have to step up. Somebody's going to have to step up. And then now they're like, oh, today I did this. Tomorrow it builds. Okay, you can go to the next slide. The next thing that's kind of embedded is my problem selection. I'm not just basing it on the content standards. I use the curriculum. We do use Eureka Math, which I absolutely love. And now Eureka Math has also created Eureka Math Squared, which embeds the CGI concepts, I guess you could say. And I also embed science, and I also embed anything that has to do with the kids. They were really into Labubus. I don't know if you guys know what Labubus are, but we had many questions about Labubus. So that's where you draw them in, and kids were, oh, I wonder if I'm going to be in the problem today. And they love that. Now this year, I'm also including my science framework. So my science framework, and we're studying astronauts, stars, moon, all of that. So this is an example of a problem that I also used for PEMDAS, or they're called it GEMDAS, which is like order of operations. And so it has kind of all these things embedded. You can go to the next question. Next slide. And so the problem solving, we read the question together, we unpack the problem, and then kids, this is them solving the problem together. And I'm walking around the whole time observing and asking questions. A big thing of CGI is you're not going to be telling them what to do. Is this division? I don't know. Is it division? Is this multiplication, teacher? I don't know. You tell me. What do you think? Okay, next slide. This is when I have taken some formal notes in CGI. We learned about the different stages of students understanding equal shares or fractions. So I just kind of took a note, who's where, what they're doing that day. This is one of my a little bit more formative assessments. You can go to the next one. And then this was another fun thing that I do. I kind of started it because I really love music in the classroom. And so instead of us just all looking at one student's work, which sometimes we do that as well, sometimes I have them walk around and pause and observe other kids' work. And so this is showing that with the music and everything. So you can go ahead and play that. Okay. I play Around the World. You might know that song. Buscan un trabajo para observar. Acá hay uno.
Yo observo que sumaron 3 y una mitad más 3 y una mitad. Es igual a 7 y lo multiplicaron.
¿Cómo sabes que 3 y una mitad y 3 y una mitad son 7?
Porque estos son 6 y si agregas el 1 aquí, hace un entero.
Ah, son 6 y un entero más son 7. ¿Qué más? Gracias, Scarlett. So that was just a quick snapshot of kind of like the prompting questions that I ask as part of the formative assessments that I'm constantly doing to check for understanding.
So would you share with us very, very briefly in one of those times when you were listening and you were looking at their work, one of those times when those routines revealed something that was surprising to you about how they were thinking or they were reasoning?
Because CGI is so building on meaning that these past couple years with these students, they've just really skyrocketed in their connection. So for example, today we were doing the coordinate plane and it had fractional units. And one of my students said, well, it could also be 1/4 could also be 0.25. And I says, well, how do you know that? So and then he explained it to the whole class. Well, 0.25 is 2,500, 2,500, 4 25s equals 1 whole. That's how. And so we all checked with understanding. Do we think that that's true, class? And so we all came to the conclusion that it could also be written as 20.25, 2,500s. Just so constantly the students are just amazing me just because I'm allowing them to really show me what they know.
Thank you, Mayra, and thank you for sharing some of the ways that it actually looks like in the classroom when you are giving them that space to engage with each other, to engage with their own thinking, and for them to show you the brilliance that is happening there. And so we're going to go now to Karina, and Karina will be sharing with us a little bit more about how formative assessment unfolds through classroom talk, collaboration, documentation. And so we'll be listening more for how do you listen to your students and how do you document and help them to keep track of what they're doing in the class.
Thank you. So I just want to reintroduce myself. I'm Karina Mekala, and I work in Chula Vista here in San Diego. And so the school that I actually support my students, I want to share something that's just very unique about it is the fact that we actually don't have textbooks, we don't have workbooks. And so a lot of my role as the facilitator of the learning and supporting them really is taking their learning and making it visible for them. The way I kind of view it is we build our textbook. And so I always tell my students our walls are our textbooks and our charts are our textbooks. I have a rolling cart in which we save our charts and then we reference them throughout the year and throughout the learning. And all of this is just in play with our GLAD strategies. Our school has invested a lot in training us with GLAD to support language development, and our curriculum Open Up also has language routines that are embedded. It's just, so I kind of took it in my role to take those language routines. I did a lot of research in my master's with these language routines and the impact of them. And so I really focus on how to take them and make them visible for my students to create these resources for them that they can continue to use, especially in upper grade math. It's really interesting to see the data that Manuel also shared. I looked at it and noticed that as our students progress into upper grade math, since it does become very abstract, I noticed that there was like a third grade, a peak, and then it declined a little bit. And similarly, we've actually seen that same pattern in our school site. And as our students navigate upper grade math, we see a decline in our data. And so this is why we are really focusing on just making their learning visible and providing these supports for our language learners. So I'm going to share just two of the routines that I use in my classroom. The first one that I absolutely love is collect and display. And so with this language routine, it's very intentional. And as the teacher, listening to what our students have to say, listening for those understandings. What I do to step in is I probe my students with the question or with an idea. In this specific one, we were looking at double number lines, and it was intended for them to see the big understanding with ratios, which is the scaling with multiplication and division. And so what I do here to support is probe the question, and I actually really love documenting my students' thinking in sticky notes. This is a form that I use as assessment to kind of do a quick check-in, since sometimes their students are a little shy or if they don't want to talk. This way, everyone has an entry point into the learning. I look at what they're saying, and then if you look closely, we could just click on, hopefully it comes up. What I do is actually to formalize the thoughts, the understandings that they're having, I use sentence strips to then really label what it is that they're seeing in the math. So in this case, through discussion, through questioning, we were able to notice the patterns that to increase, we were using multiplication, to decrease, we were dividing. Then to further support my students with the more abstract concepts, we actually, I think if you click on the next slide, please. Display the language that my students are using. And so in this case, you can see how it evolved. And so what I was aiming for specifically is them internalizing and really understanding what the word per meant and what it looks like mathematically in an expression such as a ratio 3:1. And so in this case, we evolved their language starting point with what they thought, and then we took what they knew, what they thought it meant, and then showed them what it looks like with the expressions, and continuing to use our GLAD strategies, using consistent color coding, using our sentence frames to highlight the big ideas, highlight the vocabulary that it is that I want them to see. A second routine is stronger and clearer each time. This is also embedded in Open Up. And so I've tweaked it a little bit just to make it more visual. And again, the entry point for my students using sticky notes and then partner share so that they can listen to what their thinking looks like. And specifically with stronger and clearer each time with this specific routine, it was just, what do you think at this rate means? Since the language now was changing in the word problems, and a lot of them were getting a little confused with what is it that it means. So with our sticky notes as our entry point, and then I had them share with a peer just to clarify their thinking. And the way in which the feedback was provided is through probing questions. And so that was meant for me to get more of what language they were thinking about. What kind of words were they thinking about, such as equivalent, such as more. And then again, taking my role as a teacher and labeling and really formalizing their language. And just showing them with our sentence strips what exactly that the way that they're thinking means at this rate. And so really, and just listening to what our students are saying and the language that they're bringing into the classroom, the assets that they have, it really empowers them, sets them in this place of feeling really confident, and really when they don't really think that something is. I loved in this lesson that the word stuff and feathers was actually connected to the math that we were learning. But when students hear that, oh, the way I'm actually thinking, these words that I'm actually using are connected to what we're learning, gives them really that empowerment and confidence to engage in the math and to really see themselves as the mathematicians that they truly are.
Thank you, Karina, for making that visible to us, what that looks like. And wanted to ask you, and I'll do a little pitch. I'm sure that many of you might have curiosity to, if they're not using a curriculum, how are they developing these lessons? How do you, Karina, and I will leave that for a conversation in the Q&A time in the breakout room to see how are you bringing and aligning the lessons. What are you using as a foundation to then bring those standards to life in connection to the cultura, the language, and the equity piece in those lessons. So, but can you share with us maybe a moment, similarly to what I asked Mayra, a moment when you were listening to a student and it something really sparked an insight into what the student was thinking or how the student was visioning the concept that maybe if you were not taking the time to listen, you might have missed.
Yeah, so specifically right now we're currently developing their understanding of proportional relationships. And so with this is taking the time when in the dialogue and the discourse that they're having, really seeing is how they're thinking about the relationships with the numbers, thinking about how the two quantities are connected. And so it's really just being attentive to the fact when I was listening to them share their strategies with their partners, or even just simply as documenting in the sticky notes that I collect and use as a little entry ticket, seeing that in fact they were understanding how the relationships are connected. They are seeing the patterns and how the numbers are working together. And so in just really just being attentive to what they're saying and really just validating that the way that they're thinking really gives me an insight, and mainly really just also places them as feeling just very confident in the way that they're thinking and that the way that they're understanding the math.
Thank you, Karina. And so we will turn now to our next panelist, and Elizabeth, Liz. As we are thinking about the formative assessment, what it looks in our classroom, I know that you have been working a lot with your own growth as an educator, and also with teachers in your school, but also in other dual language schools, to bring in some of that growth and challenge in entering this dance of assessment. And so tell us more about the work that you're doing.
Thank you. So I currently am in cohort 5's Teach Plus EBCAN Emergent Bilingual Change Network. But prior to that, I was a participant in 2024 with CalTOG's EL Advocacy Institute. And on the work that I am that we're currently I'm embarking with my staff is really knowing who our students are, who are we serving. And go to the next slide, please. So the work, the work both Californians Together and Teach Plus centers around the California English Learner Roadmap. And for my work, we're really focusing in on Principle 1 and Principle 2. Next slide, please. So looking at these elements, really knowing who your students are and realizing all the different English learner profiles. Veronica, you shared some of them at the beginning of the multilingual learner profiles, right? And there's this umbrella, you know, knowing who we are serving is key. And, you know, all of these, you know, the bilingual, being in that dual language classroom, really emphasizing that biliteracy is a superpower, right? And that creates that sense of belonging. And next slide, please. So after taking a poll with my staff, we talked about why. Why is it important to know who, you know, who are we serving? Who are those, you know, those little minds that we're empowering every day in teaching? So if you look at the left, right, you know, that is equality, right? Providing equal resources, that whole group instruction. But what do students really need? They need the differentiated instruction, the targeted instruction, and knowing who are the students that we are serving really allows us to provide them with that scaffolded instruction and targeted instruction. Next one, please. So right away, when I started doing this work with Teach Plus, right away I wanted to get in with my staff about the instructional strategies again, but we really needed to know who the students we are serving in order to provide them with that scaffolded instruction, that targeted instruction that I'm speaking about. So we are really working on element 2A, which is that integrated and designated ELD. What language is necessary for our students to be able to access the curriculum, specifically in math? You know, that access to the full curriculum. I'd like to go next. Next, please. So, you know, Veronica talked about the math framework and the formative assessment being like a dance, right? And that's exactly what it is. You know, what do our students need to know? How are we going to know if they know it, right? And we need to recognize, I'm sorry, one moment. Recognizing their home languages is so important, right? And seeing them through that asset-based lens, encouraging those multiple modes of expression, you know, valuing collaboration and discourse, just like those beautiful practices you've seen earlier in the classroom. And what does that look like in the classroom? You know, us gathering that evidence for that really illustrates students thinking across languages and really valuing their linguistic repertoires. Next, please. So in my classroom, this is what it looks like. Lots of conversaciones, lots of number talks in both languages, moving fluidly between languages to clarify ideas. That translanguaging, right? Mobilizing the language to create meaning, you know, and it calls for that. That helps with the scaffolding when we're really trying to understand what our students need. Next one. Next slide, please. So here's an example, one of the things with that problem solving process, you know, formative assessments, you know, that what it's a lot of teachers analyzing student talk, their written work. I'm constantly going around as the other presenters with my anecdotal records, constantly listening and feedback. What we need to understand, the feedback of common formative assessment is very, very important. It's actionable. It's helping students refine their mathematical thinkings and understanding what more do they need conceptually and linguistically. In the classroom, again, you see what that looks like, right? Math conferences. I conference with my students almost every day, giving them those nuggets that they need, those math routines. And really, you know, some of the examples here that you see are exit tickets, right? That are linguistically flexible, that they can respond in whatever language that they prefer. And really lots of meta-linguistic anchor charts in the classroom. I think the next slide might show that. There you go. So formative assessment as a bridge in the classroom. In the dual language classroom, we're looking at what students know across languages, not despite them, making those instructional decisions right there and then that integrate language and content goals. And again, providing that immediate and culturally linguistic responsive feedback, and empowering students as active participants in their learning, reflecting while they're revising and articulating their understanding. So here you could see some examples from my classroom of metalinguistic anchor charts that we use, and then taking it a little bit further when we look at how language works in both languages.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
And I appreciate so much you sharing about your own learning, your own growth in terms of going deeper into the EL roadmap, and in your work as you are connecting with the math framework and the EL roadmap. Can you very quickly just tell us one time when you saw that connection really come to life in your work or with your colleagues?
It's in the growth, we're constantly being asked to look at data, right? And I'm always after looking at data, then what? So really working on the then what, what do our students need? Not waiting till the very end, at looking at summative data, right? It's not about that any longer. So I think teachers really working together, and our PLCs have become so much more powerful because we're looking at this formative data, during our PLCs. And just in the classroom, students making those connections through, they're listening and speaking and seeing their growth in the classroom. I think for me, and that, we talk a lot about the trajectories towards biliteracy, right? It's really, really relevant in the classroom and in the data.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And as we continue in this movement in seeing how formative assessment takes place in the classroom, the professional growth that needs to happen, we're going to turn to Violeta, who is going to share with us about the process, the journey that she has been part of with her district, with the leaders in her district, as they are in year one of implementation after having adopted and really try to adopt a high quality instructional material curriculum. But we wanna hear, how did your district keep that focus on multilingual and dual language learners through the process? So share with us.
Thank you so much, Veronica. So as Veronica mentioned, we are early adopters, and I'll share our demographics so that you can see what we took into consideration when iReady was selected. So as I mentioned earlier, I am a program specialist from the multilingual department here in San Bernardino City Unified. Next slide, please. So I did want to highlight my team. The reason being is because we are a large district. You'll see our numbers in a minute. And the reason why I wanted to show you this is because, as you can see, each of us oversees a cluster of schools. We each oversee anywhere from 8 to 10 schools. I'm the lead for the Southern Cluster, and 7 of my 8 schools are dual immersion schools. So I not only get to support our dual immersion teachers, but also our mainstream teachers, because when we have done our PD, we always bring to the forefront, yes, designated is extremely important. However, when you're teaching content, you're also teaching language. So we always make sure that when we do walkthroughs, when we do observations, we bring that to the forefront. So here we have our demographics. So we are a fairly large district that's located in the Inland Empire. We have a total of 74 schools. I work for the multilingual department elementary side of things. So as you can see, we have a total of 54 elementary schools, which is why each of us oversees a cluster of schools. About 20% of our population are English learners, and then our graduation rate is about 92.5. I also wanted to highlight in our district within San Bernardino, we have about 44 different languages that are spoken by our students and families. So those are all the things that we had to consider when we started to consider the programs that we were going to adopt. Next slide. So here is a list that was created. Again, we're early adopters. So we do have a math leadership team, and we do work really closely with our elementary instruction department. They also oversee schools. They also have clusters, but because we are early adopters, this is exactly the list that was created. And as you can see, our materials needed to include culturally responsive teaching, teacher-supported materials. So teachers shouldn't have to create their own materials. It should already be prepared for them. I can tell you from experience as a former bilingual and mainstream teacher, when we had our prior adoption, I was doing a lot of the work. I was creating a lot of the materials so that I could support my multilingual learners and also my English only students. Of course, supports for our students, language development, and then teacher and student supports for differentiation. Our SPED teachers always ask us, how does this apply to me? How can I implement this in my classroom? So we made sure that our entire population was going to be supported and provided with the necessary supports. So here's our adoption timeline. The two programs that we consider in the end were Eureka and iReady. As you can see here, this is work that started back in August of 2023, so 2 years back. Every year we do have a summer conference, and we do, of course, we did 2 years back actually take a look at the framework, knowing that we were going to be early adopters. We also are a Kagan district. So in preparation with what was coming, and we knew we were going to adopt early, we prepared our teachers from the beginning, from the get-go, so that they could be ready when they got the materials. So as you can see, publishers did provide PD for the selected teachers that got to actually field test the program. And then the materials did come during the summer, and we've already started to provide PDs. I do want to highlight that we just did the month of September, along with our elementary instruction counterparts. We actually did a class demo, K through 6, and it was amazing to see it in action. And we got lots of good feedback from our teachers and from our students as well. We had, of course, our admin, district admin, department admin there. So they got to see it in action. So it's been work that has been in the works for 2 years prior to us adopting this last summer. Next slide. So here is, in addition to all the PD that our mainstream teachers do receive, we do really fight for our dual immersion teachers. So every year they have an ongoing Biliteracy Foundation series. We have an ongoing guiding principles for dual language education. Our teachers also every year, prior to the year starting, they have an annual biliteracy pre-service. This year, the target was mathematical language routine, and this was done in Spanish for our biliteracy teachers. We also do provide them with time to network and plan with not only the teachers at their sites, but with teachers at other dual sites, and they always borrow and steal ideas from each other. We're also now doing a dynamics of cross-linguistic instruction. And these are strategies, of course, for building biliteracy. That's something that we started this year. We're also focusing on benchmark education, sound spelling transfers in English and Spanish for K through 2nd. Our teachers also have access to our SLA, SLD math curriculum guides, and that's something that, again, we work on, and then we mirror what our English only teachers have. So we're always fighting for equity for our biliteracy teachers. And then we're a DI instructional minute, so we're a 90-10 model in our district. So our K1 and 2, the math is all in Spanish. Our 3rd grade scholars are doing math in English, and then 4th, 5th, and 6th, half of the year is done in Spanish, and then the other half is done in English.
Thank you, Violeta. Thank you for uplifting the great work that your district has done in making sure that they are providing professional development that continues to center teachers and educators in multilingualism. And I just want to ask a quick question about how did the math framework help to in the training? What was something that helped in this process to really understand what high quality materials are?
So as we know, there was an update, so we ensured that we brought to the forefront to all our teachers across the district, all our elementary teachers, because we have over 1,000 of them, that when they're teaching math, they have to teach with equity and they have to engage their students. The students should be talking, not just sitting there. As we know, it's a huge shift from what we had prior. I've mentioned this to Veronica. We had to go from a 1.0 to a 2.0 because the curriculum was not meeting the needs of our students, not only our mainstream students, but in our general population. So the reason why we brought that to the forefront is to ensure that when they received the materials and they saw the materials and they started to adopt the materials, they were going to be ready and they were going to be able to implement it. We're in year one. We're 3 months into the school year. It's a huge shift for us just because it's very different than what we had prior. Now we see a lot of our students doing the talking. We see them solving the problems. We see them working collaboratively, and it has been a shift. And we are supporting our teachers so that they feel successful because it's year one, and they know that they can not only count on us to support their multilingual learners, but also the elementary side of things because they focus and target in the math content.
Thank you, Violeta. And I do remember in our conversation that you mentioned that part of your professional development included really going in deep with chapter 2
Yes.
of the math framework and really working on the lens, the lens that teachers had as they were engaging with a new. And you mentioned that teachers were saying this is a new way of teaching. This is absolutely a change. And so thank you so much for highlighting the ways in which the system needs to really shift and how we need to continue advocating for those shifts in mindset, but also in practice. And so I am going to invite Dr. Lavadens, who is going to come and share with us a little bit, inviting us to action as we prepare to go into our breakout groups. So after our call to action, we'll be going to our breakout group to engage with the panelists. So all the questions that you had, you can bring there.
Okay, that was a wonderful set of presentations from so many different aspects of teaching mathematics and formative assessment. And this idea of a call to action, I think you could hear, I mean, at least I was able to hear, I hope you were too, that how every teacher that spoke today is an advocate for the students, for rigorous and robust teaching, for making classroom policies about how they're going to address the needs of every student in their classroom, and how they are going to orchestrate equitable, relevant, rigorous mathematics opportunities through language learning experiences in their classroom, through how they observe, watch their students engage in what some previous researchers called kid watching, and how every instructional decision they make, whether it's in their own classroom or it's setting district policy across the district and building bilingual dual language programs to make sure that the students that they have are able to manifest their mathematical brilliance, to utilize their mathematical brilliance. We also heard some amazing things about how teachers collaborate with each other, with other teachers, with their coaches, to advocate from a classroom isolation place where you're only working with students but not connecting with other teachers, with family members, with the community. So teachers are policymakers and advocates. They're policymakers because you make those decisions every day. And you also are policymakers because you take that advocacy stance about elevating the brilliant conversations that you can have with your students from an assets-based perspective so that they can do their best, because the teachers that you saw and heard from the educators that you saw and heard from do their best every day to invite that brilliance into their classrooms through the interactions that they have. So now, with that in mind, it's an invitation for you all to also, those of you who are here, who've been listening with such great attention, and I've been monitoring the chat as well, an invitation for you to engage in the next part of this conversation for meeting and talking with our students, with our participants about their students, about their practice. So Veronica, I turn it back out to you to invite folks to dive deeper with individual conversations in our breakout rooms.
Thank you, Magali. And as the breakout groups are open, you can choose to go to where do you have some questions? What are some of those things that you felt validated parts of your instruction or your thinking? And what are some of the other questions that are going to help you see yourself as an advocate? So the breakout groups are open. If you click in the Zoom menu at the bottom where it says breakout rooms, that should pop up your little window that allows you to choose. So you should have access to any of the breakout groups that you would like. So our rooms are open. And if you scroll all the way down, you'll see Mayra Lavadens, Karina, Elizabeth, Violeta Hernandez. And so we invite you to go and ask questions, hear more about what they're doing. While we're coming back, there's a poll for you, a question. And we thank you so much for engaging. I know that we could spend hours talking with each other, learning from each other, and really figuring out how do we encourage each other to engage in a different way with our own learning and with our students. And so as we started talking about our coalition, we have two colleagues who are going to share very briefly about ways in which you can continue to connect with the coalition and using that to build capacity. And yeah, I'm going to let them take it over. So Benito, and I will share my screen.
Gracias, Veronica. What a treat to get to spend the last part of the day getting to talk to all of you and hearing directly from educators who, like Magali was describing, are policymakers here. So the main thing is really to emphasize the infographic. So it's an excellent resource that is going to basically streamline your own understanding to how you can engage specifically with our coalition. I've just dropped it in the chat, and so the infographic is the very nicely designed way to really break down so many different complex resources. So when you're able to access it, what you'll see is that it actually breaks down by various contents and specifically around how to actually implement. So the main thing, though, to emphasize is we will always be as a coalition supportive of the work that you're doing in local context. So we remain steadfast in our partnership, and these resources are great. And so now that you're here, our call to action for all of you is that you share them with your teams. This is a great wealth of tools to really use in different ways. And I know we're just about at time, Veronica, so I'll stop there, and folks can continue their
Thank you,
journey.
Benito. Thank you, Rosana. If you want to share with us.
Of course. Thank you. Buenas tardes. Rosana Camacho. I'm thrilled to share, for a couple of minutes, a very powerful new tool that I think will transform the way you think about instructional materials for Spanish language arts. And that is our ELSF's Benchmarks of Quality for SLA. And this is a framework really designed to ensure rigor and authenticity in Spanish language instruction. This is the work of La Doctora Rebecca Bloom Martinez and her ELSF team, who thanks to that synthesis of research, we have a clear research-based benchmarks of quality to guide publishers on one hand in developing, but also districts in selecting high quality SLA materials. So together, these 5 benchmarks of quality that you see on your screen set a new standard for Spanish language arts, one that honors the language, that honors the speakers, and that honors the students who are learning. And so I invite you to explore this and other SLA resources by visiting our website or scanning the QR code on the screen. Muchas gracias, un placer.
Thank you, Rosanna. And you will get all these links in a follow-up message. So we will make sure that you get it. I don't want to miss inviting you to La Jornada Pedagógica. Is a conference that it's all in Spanish. So please, we'll share links and information about these, but we would love to have you join us in February 7. So save the date already and come join a group of educators, all in Spanish, and we will be celebrating biliteracy and multilingualism. And so stay connected. We'll send you these, but we have a lot of resources as a coalition, and SEAL also has a lot of resources, again, for free. So make sure that you check those out. So thank you so much for spending your time with us this afternoon and for the ways that you honor your students every day and that you honor their languages, their cultures, and their mathematical brilliance. So on behalf of SEAL and our partners, we invite you to take one anchor from today and try it this week. Biliteracy by design happens one intentional move at a time. So we are grateful that you were with us. Have a good evening.